Now, let me welcome our next speaker. Her name is Mercedes Wieners, and she is the Director of Submission and Interaction at the ECHA, the European Chemical Agency. Her work includes communication and stakeholder engagement activities, enforcement and support to industry, and the registration process under REACH. Ms. Wieners has more than 17 years of experience in the field of chemicals legislation. Prior to joining the agency, she worked in Brussels on the adoption and implementation of REACH. Moreover, she worked on other EU and international chemicals management topics in different positions in the European Commission and Chemical Industry Association. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. And thank you very much for the invitation and very warm congratulations to BFR on your anniversary. I am very pleased to be here, and also these congratulations come from all your friends and colleagues in Helsinki in our European Chemicals Agency. I'm here today to share with you our recent experience in running, launching, and learning from what we call joint EU-wide campaigns on topics that are of wide interest and related to chemicals and actions that have been taken on chemicals at European level. So what have we learned from these joint campaigns, and what has been our approach to communicate broadly on these topics? And I will have two examples, the restriction of substances in tattoo inks, and then the awareness raising on a European initiative to better tackle poisoning accidents at the European homes. But before, let me start with just sharing our reflections on when do we think is a good moment or a good occasion to launch a European-wide campaign on which topics. And we start with a reflection of this should be a topic that will benefit from broad communication. Why? Because the audiences are very diverse, because it is not very specific to one country, but relevant for many, many countries at different levels, and because there is a potential controversy, or we have a particular interest in bringing this correct message, as we were just talking, in the networks from the very beginning. Also topics that will benefit from these harmonized messages across the EU, again, because of the potential for misunderstanding. So we want to come up with harmonized messages. So wherever you are in the EU, you will get similar messages and similar statements on why these actions are being taken and what is the intended impact. Also, efficient use of resources. I think the limited resources that we are all facing in all our organizations are a reality, and that's why it becomes even more important not to reinvent the wheel every time, but to be aware of what we are all working on, what we are all producing, and capitalize on these efforts, not only because of harmonization, but also because of efficiency. And finally, to be able to reach out to audiences that for many of us it will be very difficult unless we do it together. And you will hear a lot about this joint and working together, and I think this is what we've heard from the previous speakers as well, and definitely the only way to move in this complicated world on complicated topics. So I start with the tattoo campaign, as we call it, just to give a bit of context. This was triggered by a European-wide restriction on the use, actually, of thousands of hazardous chemicals that were found to be present in tattoo inks and permanent makeup inks. And the European Union decided to restrict the use of these hazardous chemicals, the presence in the inks, in tattoos and permanent makeup. So we decided that this was sufficiently broad and sufficiently important to be used for a European-wide campaign jointly with member states and partners from stakeholders. And we did a joint campaign where we led together with 4 countries, and I think BFR was also contributing to the development and the preparation of the restrictions, so it was also somehow on board. We target the launch of the campaign with the entry into force of these restrictions, so it was at the same time to raise awareness also for tattoo parlors, for example, that they needed to be very conscious of the inks that they were using, but also for tattoo users, that they were now reassured, let's say, that as of beginning of this year, the inks used in the tattoos will be safer in Europe. So you see again here the importance of visual communication. For us, it was very important to come up with a positive and a proactive message from the beginning. This is not about diminishing the use of tattoos. It is more about making them safer. So we went for this information hub for an infographic where we were proactively addressing the questions that the audiences may have, and also with a very visual, interactive option, so that there was a positive message on tattoos at the end. We proactively address why are we doing this, what is it that we are doing, and what do the experts say. Again, very important to have expertise, science-based communication, so that people can go to the source of potential questions. What were our messages? I think for us it was very important to own the message from the beginning and to proactively address the questions that may pop up and that we already saw coming up during the whole legislative process. So for us, our first and foremost important message was that tattoos are now becoming safer in Europe. So it is much better, and the consumers and the users can be reassured, but also the professionals that are working in this field are also taking the safety as one of the first priorities in their professional activities. Also an opportunity to promote the fact that we have harmonized legislation in Europe, meaning that we are in an internal market and therefore all these products will be safer wherever in Europe. So also an opportunity to promote the fact that we have this EU-level legislation. We also wanted to provide facts to compare that we are addressing chemicals that are otherwise already restricted in things like cosmetics, so that consumers could get more familiar with the type of substances that we were banning in this case. Also the hazards of the chemicals. We were talking about chemicals that can cause from skin allergies to more severe effects, like provoking cancer or other effects in reproduction, for example. So we wanted to be very clear about why it was important to ban these chemicals, because the effects were serious for the health. Also, again, to be positive about the fact that there are safer alternatives. So we are not totally restricting the potential development of the tattoo industry, because there are safer alternatives that can be used as substitutes. And finally, also very important, and perhaps we have talked a bit less about this, the process. How do such decisions come to be in the European Union? For us, it was also important to take the opportunity to explain, and this is always very tricky, because it's always a more boring part of this communication. What is the process that is being science-based, very important, that is being transparently run, and also very participatory, so that the key stakeholders have had plenty of opportunities to pass their views, and they have been taken into account, and the way they have been taken into account to come up with a decision. So these were our key messages, what we're trying to convey with this campaign. How we did it, I think we went for a centralized information hub, like a centralized web page, the one I showed before, on this restriction, with this interactive infographic to have a central point where everyone involved in the campaign could always go and then fetch the messages, fetch the visuals, and fetch any infographic or any material. We opted to run this campaign quite heavily on social media, because it was found to be appropriate for the audience. And we also decided to have what we call a toolkit. So a set of infographics, images, and messages that could be ready to be used by anyone that wanted to participate in this campaign in social media. And the material was also translated into all the languages, so that participants from across Europe could also readily use the material in their social media. We also spent some budget on it. That was also a learning. I think to be able to have a bigger impact, you need to invest budget in this. This is how internet and social media work these days. So we went for a paid campaign in Instagram and on Facebook that helps targeting the right audience via the social media channels. And then finally, we went for also podcasts and videos. The podcast is something we are experimenting with in the European Chemicals Agency, and we take it as an opportunity where we can go a little bit more in depth in some issues, and where you can also interview different stakeholders to tackle a complicated issue from different angles. For example, in this case, we were having an interview with a dermatologist, we were having an interview with a tattoo artist that was explaining the job, that was explaining how they were going to get adapted to this restriction, and also to a toxicologist that was explaining, hopefully in a more layman language, what were the effects of these chemicals that were being banned. And the podcast allows you to provide this a bit more in-depth information, something that is extremely difficult to do in something like a social media. So we also wanted to complement this with this option in this case. We had 16 countries engaged in the joint campaign, so very happy with that. It went really across Europe, and we had the member state authorities, also some ECHA stakeholders were also involved from industry, from consumer associations that were echoing the messages, and then the Commission representations in the EU, which we found a very useful channel to involve in these campaigns, because they really have very good networks at different local presence, but also with this EU flavor. So we found them very, very useful as partners in this case. So a truly EU-wide campaign with stakeholders and the Commission's involvement as well. Very, very good. Then I moved to the second campaign, the second example I wanted to share with you today, which was about the poisoning accidents, what we call the UFI campaign. The UFI is the Unique Formula Identifier, which was a European initiative to add this code to the label of all the hazardous products that are in almost everybody's homes. So that in case of a poisoning accident, mainly targeted for those involving children, that the parents or the tutors or the adults that are at home in such a situation have a very quick and effective way to convey which product has it been exposed to the children and why are they trying when they call the poison center. So this code conveys this information of what are the substances in the product, which is exactly what the recipient of the call needs to be able to give the best advice in these cases. So this was more an awareness-raising campaign, and again, an opportunity to show what EU does to protect citizens from health risks. Here we went again for a joint campaign together with member states and different partners from industry and stakeholders. Why did we decide that this topic deserved an EU-wide campaign and a joint one? It was because we realized that half of the calls to European poison centers concerned children. So it was particularly targeted for homes with small children, because it seems to be a very, very important part of these poisonous incidents. We wanted to raise awareness of where to find this UFI code, and to this day, whenever I try with family and friends, like, do you know that this exists? I think we are making progress, but this is always something very useful to go back to, because we are talking about saving lives. So where is the code? And you need to be aware that it is there so that you can use it when you call the poison center to very quickly identify which is the product that has caused the accident, and therefore have the best advice. So the aim of the campaign was basically the education of the parents or the tutors of the adult presence in homes, so that they were aware of this code and to know what the EU had done. So how we did it in this case, we also went for a centralized web where you could find all the messages, all the images, and all the infographics that were developed. And then we did a joint planning and this material done together with the stakeholders, because it's very important to have their feedback from the industry that is manufacturing these products, so that they can also convey their own experience on how consumers read the labels, for example, but also from national authorities, organizations like the BFR and also some of the help desks that also get questions about this, so that we get their feedback to make sure that our messages are clear, are understood, and are fit for purpose. Very, very useful to get their feedback. We went again for social media material in all EU languages, and these were all available and downloadable from this centralized website, so anybody that wished to participate in the campaign could go to the website, download the material, and use it to echo these messages in their social media or in the communication channels. We also went for a paid campaign in Instagram and Facebook to again increase the reach out and increase the number of followers at the same time, but also allowing a more targeted reach to some key partners that could perhaps echo the messages much better. In this case, we also targeted not only journalists that were interested in the topic, but also politicians. I think this was a good topic that politicians felt very confident to engage with. It's a positive one. It's a very clear EU action. So we felt that it was one where politicians could perhaps more easily relate to. And we were surprised by the reception that we got. And also the use of influencers that were also interested in consumer products. Again, truly European and truly multi-stakeholder campaign, so very happy with the result that took place in this case. And as I mentioned, we also were echoed by politicians, which in this case resulted in quite many reactions from different countries where the politicians chose to participate. So overall, the results of these two campaigns, I mean, you have some figures here. Maybe worth mentioning on the figures is when you have a visit to the campaign page, we're always very interested in the way of interaction during the visit to the website. And we see, for example, that people actually not only visit, but many actually share the content or click in different options. So that gives us an idea that goes beyond the mere visit, but they actually take the information and share it. And also the use of blog posts. When we provide this information to bloggers, I think the blogs actually have a very wide reach also out. So you can reach to many, many more citizens via blog posts as well as press articles. So that was also something we recognized. So to conclude, what have been our conclusions or our learnings from these two campaigns that we've run recently? First of all, I think working together definitely helps. And when working together, I think you need to have a very conscious decision on who are your partners, definitely member states, also key stakeholders that are involved. Select, identify the partners and work together to spread the message. Define the messages from the beginning, also very important to come with this positive, with this proactive, with this, as you were saying, correct messages from the beginning. And also to be able to reach audiences at national level that you can very difficultly done at European level only. We believe to increase the outreach, translated material definitely helps, and also to have this toolkit where people are more confident to share the information because it comes from a centralized source, is ready-made, the images are there, so that really helps the key multipliers to feel more confident in sharing the information. And finally, also a plea from our side. We are very keen to continue working like this. I mean, I think we have had good learnings. We will try to improve each time, but we've realized that this is the best way to communicate on the very often very complex topics. So very keen to work further with national authorities, with all the partners and stakeholders on future topics, and importantly, to continuously assess from this experience what was the efforts that we put in a campaign and what were the results that we got. So continuously monitoring our actions because we need to adapt to whatever works best, which is not necessarily the one-size-fits-all. And I already threw a little teaser, perhaps the upcoming PFAS restriction that we will have in Europe, maybe something of sufficiently broad interest and importance that could be a good subject for the future campaign. So there you have an offer from our side to very keen to continuously work together, and this could be perhaps a good opportunity for working together in the next year. Thank you very much for your attention. Happy to answer questions. Thanks a lot.